Happy Friday, folks. Happy Friday, folks. Thanks for being back with me. I know that I took a week off. I just had some technical difficulties as well that you'll never know about because we have editing services for these podcasts. So as I let a bit of smoke to get us going, I actually appreciated a lot of the feedback that I got for not having a buzz out last week. So for those who hounded me about their frustration of not having their coffee buzz available on their way to work on Friday, I appreciate you getting in my grill a little bit. Truth be told, it actually felt cooler egotistically that that was the case because when you're running an independent solo branded show with no advertisement and sponsors and you're completely, I guess, voided from commerce in a podcast game, you tend to choose other things that seem a little bit more priority, I guess, when you make podcast. And I chose work over podcasting last week and went more towards my full-time gig of working with people in the performance field. But like I said, I appreciated the chirps and the intentionality and time that people took out to send me some text. And I apologize. I'm not going to say it won't happen again because it might. And there's some of the technical difficulties of hearing text messages coming through on this thing, but we're getting a new computer and we got a lot going on. So this last week has been pretty heavy with a lot of the activity in the Martin household and the HM performance business. We got a mobile sauna. If you guys have followed along for the years, I got my first mobile sauna in probably I think it was 2018 is when we completed it. Daniel Wilson, Ken Hannigan, just two of my good friends now. I've known them for a long time. They've both turned into two really good friends of mine. They helped orchestrate that, and it was the Mind Strong sauna for a while. And I took some years out of the mobile sauna game, and I'm back into it. And Ken is driving the ship right now. Ken Zen, he's been going by that name for many years, but Ken Zen is largely driving the ship here as the partner with me on this second adventure. And no shade on D-Don. D-Don's just in Arizona, and Daniel Wilson, and he's a sauna builder down there. He does a great work. He does a lot of really positive work with building saunas. He's also into permaculture and really cool people. As for Ken and I, we're trying to integrate coffee and sauna. So a little sip and soak mentality where you can drink coffee and tea and have some kombuchas and sparkling water, and we'll see where it goes. I've never been in the coffee game. I was trying this morning. I was at a coffee shop yesterday, actually. I've been doing YouTubes on how to learn how to make a coffee. Latte art is what they call it for what I'm finding, because I know how to do things like a cortado, an Americano. Obviously, it drips easy. I'm okay at the pour over. I don't know if pour over is going to be feasible right from the start, just to how much time it takes to get that completed. But lattes, I'm learning how to make lattes with the milk ratio and the foam. And I think the last thing I really got to figure out is how to really get the head of the coffee so that that foam hits at the top of the mug or the cup and doesn't pour over, but it just kind of sits flat at the top, and having a design in there, right? And I'm getting close. I've learned how to get the foam and the head of the coffee to line up, and it definitely tastes good. I just think we got to get to that final piece of aesthetics. And once that happens, I got a few more weeks before we go live with the mobile coffee and sauna to master this. And I feel like I will. But at the same time, a lot of my philosophy here is quality bean and quality heat. You want to have a quality coffee and you want to have a quality sauna. Kuma stove, shout out. This is a non-sponsored shout out. Kuuma. I talk about Kuma. I got to meet Garrett, the owner of Kuma, at Sauna Days a couple weeks ago, who seemed like a really cool guy. I think that's the best stove in North America. and it's a great business. And all these saunas up at Sauna Days, which were all incredible saunas, incredible business people and entrepreneurs in the sauna industry all throughout Minnesota, they all had Kuma stoves. So that's pretty cool. Let's get into Coffee Buzz. So I had a few questions, and maybe I have to call Tyler Oakley, who was a college roommate of mine for a minute, college teammate at Minnesota State. I was on the phone with him before I pressed play, and he was supposed to send in a question, which I have not received it yet. But let's go. Morgan sent me one. Where is it? As I find this, he sent me two questions on Monday, so that should hopefully save us up until the Oakley ones come in, and if not, maybe we have to call them on air. Never done that before. But anyways, question for your pod. So I really like this. If a stranger bought a ticket to watch a film of your life up to this point, what would they say about it as they walked out of the theater? So Pete Oakley, who's Tyler Oakley's dad, had asked me when I was in college over 10 years ago, he asked me if I was a book, how would the book read? And I think he had a book about leadership somewhere along that same lines. And just a really intelligent, wise person with a beautiful mind. He's dove into the psychology of leadership and the behavior of leadership for a long time. But it's sort of the same question. This one's just asked in a different format. So I'll read it one more time before I answer. If a stranger bought a ticket to watch a film of your life up to this point, so I'm about to be 36 years old, I'll consider that before we get into the answer. What would they say about it as they walked out of the theater? The hard part about that question is meaning that if it were to this point and all movies have a beginning, middle, and end, would that make today the end of the story? And so this could be my final day. So that's the only way I can kind of think of that question, right? It's not ongoing. I probably can't rewrite the future or change any things that I think we're always doing about ourselves. So let's imagine it ended today, and the end of my story is, 2 months or so before my 36th birthday. If a stranger bought a ticket to watch a film of my whole life up until today, what would they say about it as they walked out? I think that might be the point, right? If this were the final day of my life, what would the story of my life be? I really think that I have to close my eyes for this. I apologize. It's just helping me think through it. I really think that I have come into my favorite me in probably the last year and a half. Not that I've never loved former parts of me, I just really like this version of myself because I'm coming out of so many disciplines and intensities that I focused on. I went 2 years really without drinking, which I've talked about on the podcast before. Not that I drink now, but I've definitely allowed myself, coming back to Minnesota and being with former friends and people I've known for a long time, I've definitely allowed myself to have a beer. I had a beer at Sauna Days. I had a beer last weekend with a bunch of my buddies, and I had a drink, a scotch with a friend the other day. And I don't know if I really love having alcohol, but I'm okay having a drink. And I do that because when I first stopped drinking, it was for pure intensity of discipline and obedience to sobriety. And I really wanted to hammer down on that. And I really focused on that for a little over 2 years. And I've now come out of that, and I feel like I have a way different relationship with alcohol. And I really enjoy that relationship where I can have a drink out of social connection, but I don't necessarily love. That's probably the only reason why I would have a drink. So I think it's taught me to savor the drink and appreciate the love of the energy of the other person or the people, and to take away the verb of drinking, and not really there to be drinking. You can be in a space to have a drink. And that took me a long time, many, many years. And I don't even know if I've mastered that. I would just say, like, it took me many years to understand that. I feel like I've just started to understand that lesson in the last month or two. And does that happen without the intense sobriety for 2 years? I don't know. But it was something that was needed. I'm sharing the story because recently I talked to my wife about this the other day. It was somewhere in the last 10 years. I spent a year where I didn't watch television. And that was a really fascinating year. And at the end of that year, I disagreed with being avoidance of television because TV is so ingrained into the fabric of society. And at the same time, I actually felt a little bit more anxiety having not watched television. So I know from a biological standpoint, watching TV when the sun goes down, having blue light, being exposed to artificial light late at night disrupts our sleep. And there's a lot of science behind that. But at the same time, there's something about me at the end of a day with my mind to be mindless, not mindful, and just be entertained by something, which tends to be the television. There's like a relaxing hour to 2 hour thing in the evening that I don't do every night, but I love watching a movie, a couple times during the week. And especially with my wife and my kid and my dog, it's a fun thing to be mindless and watch TV. I've appreciated watching a movie so much more after not watching television at all for a year. And that was a long time ago. It's the same thing like fasting. I always thought hangry was something that controlled my life until I did a 3 day fast. And that was enough for me. I know people fast a lot, and I'll do intermittent fasting often. And I've done many 24-hour fast, but a true 72-hour fast, no food, just water. I did that years ago, and it's stayed with me. The lesson of that has stayed with me until this day because I've realized that I don't have to eat during any time during a day and I'm going to be fine. And it's really changed my relationship with hangry. When I played professional sports, I couldn't go, I'd have 4 meals a day. And so I'm saying these things because of all the things I've done in my life, those being some of the examples, I think trying the fine tuneness of playing Major League Baseball and playing professionally until I was 26 was a really long pursuit of trying to be masterful in awareness, to having such acute differences and crystallizations of trying to be perfect. And doing that in front of people was really powerful for me and my psyche as well. And I think all this plays into the question because the person I am today, I'm the most grateful for because of things like I'm sharing, because I think that it's allowed me to feel the most comfortable in my own skin. And this is the most comfortable I've felt in my own skin in my understanding as I ever have in my entire life. So yeah, if it were to end today, I feel like I personally would have come to a nice peaceful ending, a nice conclusion to the movie. And I think that storybook form, that would create a really nice, beautiful, like any other movie that anyone buys a ticket to. I think it would leave the audience with a very happy, joyful, peaceful, calming ending that people like a lot in movies about people or the human experience. So I do think my ending would end happy. And I think that really good stories start and begin with the same concept. So if I think about when I was first born and who I was when I was a little kid, I was also very happy. I remember being a really happy boy, and I was very fortunate because I grew up with parents who incentivized me to chase my imagination, and they were very open to me trying things, and they were extremely supportive. And I think that that aided in my happiness. And so if I were a movie or a story in that sense, my start and my finish to where my finish is today feel very similar. I feel connected to the inner child. I feel curious still, which I'm very grateful for being in my mid 30s. I think that that's really important to me to not be fixated in my mind, to realize that I can just drop anything I've ever done and become a barista. I just have always felt that is an exciting thing. And I have those curiosities and those ambitions to try things as in my adulthood because of my childhood. And I feel very connected to that. Now, why do I think somebody would leave this and feel what they would say about it. I think the meat of this story would be the middle. It would be the middle of the story. And I think the middle of my story, I think people would leave the theater and say that was a very, I think it would be impactful to them. I think that they would feel connected to and they'd find similarities and they would feel very authentic, vulnerable moments if they left the theater, because the meat and potatoes of my story is written through adversity and struggle and massive failures and extreme pursuits that I didn't accomplish and breakups and heartbreaks and painful injuries and relationships ending, like I said, and like anything else that happens in life. And I think that it would be fascinating with my story specifically because of the ramblingness that I've had in my life. I mean, I've been moving my whole life. I've been rather nomadic my whole life. I've had a ton of different jobs. I've had some really weird situations happen where, like I've talked about this in the past, I was a teacher at Minnesota State as a student athlete, and I was able to teach. I was a part-time professor at the university when I was 22 and 23 years old. And I think so much of little minute funny stories like that and situations I put myself in, I was on a medical staff with Major League Baseball. I'd never been in the minor leagues. I didn't apply to be in any medical departments, and I found myself in that role. I've been a strength coach, a sauna meister, a cold plunge expert, an author, a podcaster. I've been able to wear a lot of hats. I've been a youth baseball coach, a college baseball coach. Uh, I was a paper boy growing up. Like, I think that a lot of my stories in the middle would be where I make my money in terms of that question being answered in a positive way. Because I haven't gotten the Oakley question, I tried to run that one as long as we could because I don't think I'm going to get Oakley's question. So it looks like today's coffee buzz is only going to be two questions, and the next one comes from Morgan as well. So way to lay it on me, Morg. I really appreciate it. I hope that one takes the cake for the answer. But at the same time, I'm biased, right? Because it's my story, and I'm in the headspace right now where I want to feel like you would really like me in my story. So in my opinion, you'd leave the theater and go, that was a badass dude that really went for it. And he really pushed himself to see what he was capable of. That's what I would want. You could also leave there and think that my story sucks and what an irrelevant, mediocre existence that person was. And I think that that's the beauty of art. Rick Rubin says it perfect. The best art divides the audience. And a buddy of mine was telling me yesterday, who was here, about when you produce anything, he's a musician. When you produce music, the second it's published, it no longer belongs to you. So that would actually be the actual answer. Is it doesn't really matter, because if it's my life and I published it, produced it, and then I'm dead and you watched it, obviously it's irrelevant to me on what you think about it because it's no longer for me. So that would actually be my real answer. So the second question, when you think of love, what genre of music comes to mind? That's a beautiful question. When I think of love, what genre of music comes to mind? So on the surface, as an egotistical sense of love, I would say country music. I think country music makes a lot of their money and their fame off of love stories. And I think that that's very common knowledge. So I would say country music is what comes to me in the material sense. But I would say what when I think of love in terms of depth, a depthy sense, I want to say classical, but I feel like classical music also is more that European Romeo Juliet style, really nice attire, dresses, and kings and queens type deal. And I think that we get very fantasy, mysticalness over classical music. And I definitely think that that's love. And it's similar to the modern day country, right? We look at the cowboy and the cowgirl and the truck and the love story and the dogs and the hard breakups, but how much we come together. And I think both of them, if I'm with my significant other, experiencing love, but love doesn't just have to be significant other, I suppose. That could be parents, friends. So the genre of music, I would have to imagine, has a sliding scale based off of the relationship. Who are we talking about here? Is it love? Is it even love of myself? Is it love of the divinity? What if it's worship music? What is that song? There's a uh, there's a really cool music. What is that song that I really like? There's a worship band that I really like. I don't know. I'll maybe find it. Obviously, I'm not going to come back on here and share it with you guys. But there's a worship music can be love with God, love of self, those sort of things. I think the overarching, when I think of love, what genre of music comes to mind? I would say folk music. I think folk music covers the gamut of or it covers a wide variety of love. I think you can listen to folk music with your wife and you can be dancing in the kitchen, making music in the summer with the windows open and really be loving on each other and feeling love and feeling that bliss. But I also think you can be on your buddy's back porch or out on a boat with two of your buddies, three of your buddies, and you have some folk music going and a cold beer, and you're just watching the sunset, and you're just sort of into that vibe. I think that it plays well in mixed relationship, male female dinner parties, 6 to 8 people. I think it hits that vibe, and then folk music is free enough and rated enough to be comfortable with your parents or your children, and you can find love in those avenues. And there's a very joyful energy that comes from folk music. It's dancing, but it's connecting with other people type dancing. And then the lyrics are penetrable, they make sense, there's some poeticness to them. And then the tones and the beats are blissful. And I think that folk music would be my final answer. So thanks for those questions. I hope you guys like my story, and if you go see me in theater, I hope you like the movie. I hope that you feel like you got your money's worth, and hope that you like folk music because I hope that you get to experience love to the highest degree. And with that said, one of my favorite things to sign off on: one love. Love you guys. Cheers. Happy Friday.